What I am about to share with you is something I have only confided in 50 others. I have struggled with where to start, but I will begin at the beginning. This may be a lengthy account, but I assure you, it is all true. After revealing this story to a close friend, I was admitted to a psychiatric ward. I was born in Georgia in 1972 to a religious father and a less devout mother. At the age of 3, I was given up for adoption by my parents. At that young age, I couldn't comprehend why they would abandon me, and I felt anger towards them, as well as towards heaven, Satan, and anyone else I could think of. I was eventually fostered by a couple named Dan and Robin, who appeared kind at first. However, I soon realized they were just after the financial benefits of fostering me. The abuse began when I was 6, starting with a beating after a nightmare woke Dan up. The beatings continued throughout my teenage years, and I decided to join a weight training program to defend myself. My sophomore year of high school was the last time they tried to beat me, and the first time I was involved with the police. After a particularly brutal attack, I fought back and was wrongly accused of starting the altercation. The police did not listen to my side of the story. I was sent to juvenile detention for 6 months, even though I tried to explain it was self-defense. When I was released, my social worker, Mrs. Jones, picked me up. She was a kind 54-year-old woman with 3 children and 5 grandchildren. I was told that Dan and Robin, my former caretakers, no longer wanted me. I was placed back into the system, and I kept questioning why God put me there. When I turned 18, I aged out of the system and became homeless. I was 7 months away from graduating high school, but without a home, I dropped out. I had to steal just to get food. Sleeping outside was not enjoyable, and people were cruel to me because I was homeless. I started using drugs and eventually became addicted. I felt like I was finally at peace when I thought I was going to die from using drugs, but I just found myself in darkness. I felt like I was being watched. But when I asked God why He let this happen to me, I received no answer. I was subjected to harsh criticism, spit upon, and labeled a lazy bum. Humans can be incredibly cruel to each other. At times, I went without food for a few days. Like many homeless individuals, I became addicted to harmful substances, starting with alcohol and eventually moving on to harder drugs. I reasoned that if God didn't care, then why should I? To support my habits, I resorted to stealing copper from construction sites and homes. These habits were costly. I had just sold about 30 pounds of copper for a few days' worth of drugs. I remember getting everything ready, but it was laced with something stronger. I started convulsing, vomiting, and spitting up. The thought that I would finally find peace after years of abuse and feeling unloved quickly crossed my mind. I had lost faith in God at the age of 12, and without belief in God, I had no belief in the devil. I was ready for the darkness that was closing in. My convulsions stopped and a peaceful calm took over me. I found myself hurtling through a dark tunnel at 1,000,000 miles per second, and then I stopped. I was in complete darkness and felt free. The hurt I had constantly carried, the sadness of feeling unloved, and the joy of making it all go away were all gone. When I first started using, the void was a very peaceful place. I felt like I was being watched at times, and eventually I felt the urge to speak out. I asked God why me and why I had to go through everything I did, despite being a good person. But there was no answer, no sign of God's existence. I wondered why my family gave me up, and why I was stuck with 2 people who were like demons to me. I couldn't understand why God wouldn't love me. I vented all my feelings into the darkness. I gave up asking why and muttered to myself, "Why do I bother?" Then I heard a faint voice repeating, "Let me in, let me in." In the darkness, I shouted that I couldn't stop it anyway, so it could come in. Suddenly, something approached me at an unknown speed, replacing the darkness with a bright light that was like someone shining their headlights on a long stretch of highway. The light was so intense that I had to narrow my eyes to see. What came next was indescribable. I hadn't felt this type of love until I had children, and even that love was nothing compared to this. It was as if my skin was melting off, but not in a painful way. I couldn't help but gasp as the love hit me. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I saw the outlines of two tall figures, each at least 8 feet tall or more. They adjusted their height to match mine as they approached. They both wore robes and sashes similar to what you'd see in ancient Rome. The figure on the left had brown hair and brown eyes, and was of average appearance. The one on the right, however, was stunningly beautiful, beyond what human words can describe. I asked nervously, "Who are you, and where am I?" "Be not afraid, human. You know us by many names. I am called Satan, Lucifer, and many others by humans. But you may call me what you wish." His voice was filled with pride and ego. The figure on the left then said, "I am also known by many names. Yeshua, Jesus, the Prince of Peace, the Messiah. But you may call me what you wish." I stopped them and asked, "How can this be? Every religious text says that you are mortal enemies, fighting for the souls of man since before man was created." Jesus was the first to respond. "My child, though we go about things differently, we both have the same goal in mind. My brother and I serve our Father's will. What is happening here?" I asked, confused about the term brother. "My Father created all of us, including you humans, but I was his first and beloved son," he said with disdain. "He gave you humans free will and a short lifespan, which I was jealous of. I tried to break the bond by giving humans knowledge, and for that, I was punished and cast out of my home. I never intended to take my Father's kingdom. I just wanted his attention." Satan spoke with anger towards humans. As I listened, I realized that technically we were all brothers, as we were all God's creation. "But why am I here? Shouldn't I be in hell?" I asked. Jesus then chuckled, "You served your sins in hell for 70,000 years, but now I am here to save you. Time doesn't work the same here as it does on earth. You have a choice to make, Benjamin." I was shocked, as I had only been there for 10 minutes according to my earthly perception. Jesus explained that time operates differently in this realm. I thought that there was no escape from the lake of fire once you were sentenced to hell. Satan chuckled as he spoke, confirming my fears. "Yes, there is a lake of fire, but it's reserved for the worst of your kind," he said, with a twisted delight in his voice. Jesus intervened, telling Satan to stop. "He has served his punishment and remembered our Father. You must let him go," Jesus said. Satan made one final threat or promise, saying, "At the rate you're going, Benjamin, I'll see you again soon." He then disappeared, leaving me alone with Jesus. I asked Jesus the question that had been bothering me for so long. Why was I abandoned by everyone in my life? I asked, why did my mom and dad leave me? And why did so much bad stuff happen to me? Jesus looked at me with compassion and explained that my parents loved me, and that they died in a car accident on their way home from their wedding. They begged for God's intervention, but their bodies were too damaged to be saved. He then explained that I was placed with my foster family, Dan and Robin, to provide an outlet for their anger, so that they wouldn't harm my foster sister. I was angry and frustrated, and I told Jesus that I couldn't handle all the abuse and suffering I went through. I begged for proof of God's existence, but all I was told was that I was strong enough to handle it. I felt like I was just the sacrificial lamb. I had endured some of the worst abuse a child could experience. Jesus listened patiently as I spoke. He was like my personal therapist, and I could say anything to him. After I was done talking, Jesus stepped forward and hugged me. He was one of the few people who knew what I was going through. After a while, he let go and said, "Benjamin, it's time for you to stop punishing yourself. It's time to go back to Earth." I was hesitant. I didn't see the point of going back to Earth as a 19-year-old substance abuse-addicted high school dropout. But Jesus took me for a walk and showed me the beautiful landscapes of green and blue that I had been missing. He told me I still had much to do in life and that things would get better. Although I was reluctant, I agreed to return. I woke up in the back of an ambulance heading towards the morgue. The paramedics screamed that I was alive, and they redirected to the nearest hospital. I asked where I was and what had happened, even though I already knew the answers. The paramedic told me I was found with enough drugs in my system to kill an elephant and that I had been dead. Tears ran down my face as I realized I had taken my own life, which was why I had spent 70,000 years in hell. At the hospital, I was met by a team of doctors who performed every test they could to understand how I had come back to life. After 15 minutes of testing, doctors couldn't understand why I wasn't brain damaged and retained my mental abilities. They didn't factor in the power of God. Upon release, I was arrested for theft, but a kind judge took mercy on my situation. I had no place to stay and would have ended up back on the streets. That's when Mrs. Jones, a woman I met as a child, offered to take me in. She helped me get back in school, earn a degree, get married, and start a family. She went from being Mrs. Jones to mom and grandma to my kids. I spoke at her funeral 6 years ago. My heart still aches for her. She was an angel, and God had a plan for my life. It took me time to understand why I went through what I did. Mrs. Jones already had a lot on her plate and couldn't afford another kid, but she helped me anyway. She suspected abuse by my foster parents, but didn't have proof. Eventually, the abuse came out and the foster parents went to prison. I like to think I protected the other kids. I could say more, but I'll finish with this. Ben's experience is one that touches on controversial and taboo topics, including the notion of Jesus and Satan being siblings. Despite this, Ben believes that we all come from God and are therefore all siblings, including Jesus, Satan, and humans. Satan, as described, is a cruel entity who hates humanity, but cannot prevent people from calling out to God. This is what allowed Ben to leave a dark place. This is what he claims to have seen. Let hear your thoughts below in the comment box. Stay blessed.